Welcome back. Ajay Gupta has denied ever meeting Mcebisi Jonas in Saxonwold on the 23rd of October 2015, while former Public Enterprises Minister Lynne isn't allowed to cross-examine witnesses. These are just some of the highlights of this week at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. What does this all mean, and what can we expect going forward? I'm joined by ENCA's Erin Bates, who's been following that particular commission. So what a week it's been, Erin. We heard from all these banks, and it started to sound to me like they were singing off the same hymn sheet, talking about the pressure that they say they felt once they took the decision to close down the accounts of entities linked to the Guptas.
Yes, and I think what their testimony has really done is put the highlight or the spotlight back on Mcebisi Jonas and the alleged role he played as a Gupta henchman, wheeling and dealing on behalf of the family and its allies in national government. But of course, the ANC also came under the spotlight, the likes of Gwede Mantashe and Jesse Duarte, over these meetings that they had at Luthuli House with some of the bankers who've spoken about closing Gupta-linked accounts.
Yeah, in fact, I can tell you, in as far as the ANC is concerned, it's not the first time the name of Jesse Duarte has been mentioned, and she has already indicated that she would be very keen to actually have her side heard at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, if that opportunity is afforded, of course. The interesting person from that is Mcebisi Jonas. As you say, but also Gwede Mantashe. I saw some kind of a response from him which was pretty much dismissive about these meetings that he was seeking to convene after the bank accounts had been closed, seeking to get the bank executives to come and have a conversation at Luthuli House. Did you see that?
Yes, he kind of poo-pooed any sort of controversy or sort of reaction, shock, really, about
what's the hullabaloo, I think.
Exactly. Some bankers saying, this was unprecedented in decades of careers in banking, but other bankers had actually been to Luthuli House to talk on fiscal policy and kind of banking issues and separate matters. So depending on who was testifying, there was a sort of variation in their opinion of being hailed to Luthuli House by Enoch Godongwane, who also has indicated that he'd be keen to testify at the inquiry. But certainly at the time, there was so much tumult around the South African economy that's maybe become lost in the years intervening. So it's good to have these testimonies to kind of bring that back to the fore.
But I guess the most controversial bits of testimony that came out this week were about this interministerial committee that was chaired by Mcebisi Jonas, and particularly how it seemed to follow a particular pattern that before the end of the meeting, there would be a reminder that you operating a bank needs licensing. We hold the key to licensing.
Almost as holding a knife up to the throat of these bankers, to use quite a dramatic metaphor. Yes, and Mike Brown of Nedbank saying, in fact, that's not how it works. Banks receive their license from a separate entity of government as stipulated in the Constitution, and that's the Reserve Bank. So this veiled threat he interpreted from Zwane wasn't founded in proper fact when it comes to government policy. Be that as it may, he still interpreted it as a threat and an indication that the banks were in jeopardy, at least in Zwane view, for closing these Gupta-linked accounts.
Erin, before we move from this topic and about the testimony of these bank executives, there was something that came out on the very first day when Ian Sinton testified that I thought would have caused more of an uproar than it actually did, that he seems to suggest that at this particular meeting, he can't remember which minister exactly suggested that if the choice is between closing these banks and having the kind of impact that we are talking about on the employees of these Gupta-linked companies and you breaking the laws that govern how you conduct your business and in the international monetary system, well, you should choose to actually not comply with the laws. I found that quite extraordinary.
Yes, and I think what's also been lost is the concern over who's banking for the Guptas now. There was so much reference by these different banking officials. For ABSA, it was the head of compliance. For the other three banks, it was CEOs talking about the risk of being associated with any kind of suspicion around the Guptas and alleged money laundering led them to close these accounts by early 2016. But no one's answered the question on who's moving or storing the Guptas' money now, and whether those same financial institutions, which may not be, in fact probably aren't South African, have similar concerns. We heard about HSBC and the British Parliament looking into its role in moving Gupta monies, but who else is possibly holding on to monies now that may be dubious?
All right, let's take a listen to this report, Erin, before we continue our conversation.
It wasn't me. Ajay Gupta tells the state capture inquiry he categorically did not meet Mcebisi Jonas in 2015. The former Deputy Finance Minister believes he met with Ajay Gupta, but he's also told the state capture inquiry it could have been one of the other brothers.
I have subsequently looked at press articles which depict the various Gupta brothers. Based on these photographs, I'm relatively certain that the Gupta brother at the meeting was Ajay Gupta. But I cannot exclude, based simply on the photograph, the possibility that it might have been Mr. Rajesh Gupta.
According to Ajay Gupta's affidavit to the inquiry, cell phone records and alibis at Oak Bay offices will prove that he was in Sandton and not Saxonwold on the 23rd.
Mr. Gupta said, the old men, referring to the president, seem to like me and that they have called me to check me out. I quote that. And to see, I quote again, whether they can work, I can work, and I quote, whether you can work with us.
Gupta accuses Public Protector Thuli Madonsela of baiting Jonas into implicating him. He says she asked leading questions and showed Jonas a photograph of him. Gupta points out, Jonas made no mention to Madonsela of an alleged death threat. He states, I made no offers of any nature to him to pay money to him should he be prepared to become the Minister of Finance, or that I tell the President what to do and that I control everything, nor did I make any threats to kill him. It's possible the Guptas will never testify.
They will not come to South Africa to appear in this forum at this place in South Africa at all.
Yes.
Their attitude, however, is that they will appear in person before the Commission at another place, which can be agreed upon with the Commission, live in person before you, with the evidence leaders to cross-examine them, and they undertake to give evidence there at that place. Alternatively, by such video link as you deem appropriate.
The remote video link offer has been rejected.
It may well be that you can get better evidence relating to whether they're innocent of the allegations or guilty of the allegations from other sources. And therefore their evidence is not so fundamentally important. Are we going to go to Dubai to listen to evidence that seeks to support bad denials?
Hearings resume next week Thursday. Erin Bates, Johannesburg.
So, Erin, before I release you, there's always this standard line at the end of all the media releases from the Commission into state capture that says the legal team is in the process of identifying and arranging further witnesses to testify. That's always bothered me to say. I mean, it seems they're going almost week by week, day by day, we're identifying, we're still in the process. Do we know at this point who's coming up next week?
We don't. I spoke to the inquiry spokesperson yesterday, and all we know is that we're expecting testimony to resume on Thursday of next week. Also, significantly, we know that Duduzane Zuma is going to cross-examine Jonas's version of what happened at the Saxonwold Shebeen and, which brother it may have been. We know that he has some uncertainty now about who it was, and Ajay Gupta stated on the record it wasn't him. To quote Shaggy in that brilliant song, it was me. But we don't know who's going to speak.
It's a Friday afternoon.
It is.
We'll let you quote Shaggy. Thank you so much, Erin Bates.